for the other upcoming exciting installments. And today, I'm Anisha Dairam from Sanvi, from the terrestrial team, and I'll give you a short overview of what the NBA is, and then I will hand over to Mapale Monyeki, and she'll take us through South Africa's terrestrial ecosystems and tell us a bit more about where we are losing ground and some reasons why. So the National Biodiversity Assessment is very complex and covers many aspects of biodiversity. The levels of assessment include ecosystems, species, and genetic diversity. In ecosystems, we assess all of South Africa's 980 ecosystem types, including the terrestrial realm, which is all the stuff on land, the freshwater realm, which is made up of our rivers, our wetlands, the estuarine realm, and which is where the rivers meet the sea, and also our marine realm. And many of you who have browsed the NBA website would have been able to see across all of these pages and seen the beautiful work that has been done. We also focus on assessing the cross-realm coastal zone, which is where we bring all of the terrestrial, freshwater, estuarine, and marine data together in the assessment. And then we also assess our subantarctic territory, which has much of the marine territory and two small but very important islands. We're very proud to be the first country to assess all our ecosystems across all the realms using the IUCN Red List of Ecosystems framework, which Mapale will talk about a bit later. It's very important to note that there are many partners on this ecosystem work. These include the Institute for Coastal and Marine Research at Nelson Mandela University, where they lead the coastal component, and then the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, which leads the estuarine component. For species, we are world leader in this field with the National Red List dating back 40 years. And we've applied the IUCN Red List of threatened species categories and criteria to 15 full taxonomic groups, with 3 new groups assessed for the first time in NBA 2025. These groups include the freshwater crabs, the fairy shrimps, and the spiders. And we do this with multiple partners contributing to or leading the assessments for specific taxonomic groups. One of the examples is the Endangered Wildlife Trust, and they lead the Mammal Red List, while BirdLife South Africa leads the Bird Red List. Then genetic diversity underpins all of this biological diversity and plays an important role in individual fitness. And when we say individual fitness, we mean an organism's ability to survive and reproduce. And they also include the species' ability to adapt to changing environments and overall ecosystem resilience. Yet indicators for this aspect of biodiversity are just being developed. And maybe not surprisingly, South Africa is once again at the forefront of piloting these indicators and reporting on them in the NBA. These efforts are built out of a wealth of publications and existing resources, which result in a range of NBA products, principally a book that you can download, and for the very first time for this NBA, a website with 108 web pages and thousands of images and plots and maps. Regular updates of the NBA through this website are possible now by the NBA team themselves, and the data science skills we've built over the last 4 years have allowed us to take a huge step toward a living national biodiversity assessment, and we'll use this momentum to improve our biodiversity monitoring systems. All of this, being at the forefront of biodiversity assessment, requires innovation and problem solving, and there are very few global examples to follow. It also requires collaboration within South Africa and with international scientists and institutions. Which brings us to a really key aspect of the NBA, is that it's an enormous undertaking. So with the NBA 2025, it was a collaborative effort between more than 490 contributors from over 110 institutions. And it took approximately 23,000 person days of work over 6 years. It needs a huge amount of facilitation from the leadership team and amazing will and interest of our partners in making this a useful product and process. So thank you to all those who have been involved. This is the product of the whole biodiversity of South Africa. I am now going to hand over to Mapale Monyeki, who's going to tell you a little bit more about our today's topic with the terrestrial ecosystems. Mapale?
Afternoon, is Mapale, and I will be sharing with NBA 2025, mainly focusing on the. So I'm gonna switch off my camera.
Mapale, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
That's much better, thank you.
Okay, okay. Maybe I was speaking so softly. I was saying that, okay, let me introduce myself again. My name is Mapale Munyeki, and I will, for this section of the NBA 2025, and their key findings. I try to raise up my voice.
I think it's cutting out a little bit here and there. I'm not sure if it's possible to get onto another network.
I think the problem is my computer. Give me a second.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Let's just give Mapale a minute.
Okay, and how am I now? Am I audible?
Yes, let's try again.
Anisha, how am I now? Am I
Yes,
audible?
we can hear you. I think it's a little soft for other people. If you can, please turn your volumes up as far as it can go. We do apologize for the problems with the sound.
I apologize. Okay, let me continue then. Anisha, you can.
Yes, please continue and maybe just come a little bit closer to the computer, Mapale.
All right.
Thank you.
Maybe you can go to my first slide. Okay, thank you. I'll try to raise up my voice as high as I can. All right, so before diving into ecosystem headline indicators and their key findings, I want to briefly step back and look at the broader picture that the NBA presents, particularly what it tells us about biodiversity status at an ecosystem level and why this matters beyond science itself in terms of how it directly informs real world decision making and commitments both here at home and globally. Just a quick note before I continue. Some of the slides I'll be sharing were covered in last week's session, so I'll briefly revisit them to provide context for my talk and add more layers of information. As you all know, the NBA is a national reporting and monitoring tool that provides a comprehensive and scientifically defensible overview of how South Africa's biodiversity is doing and changing over time. But it does more than that. It equips policymakers, land use planners, and conservationists with evidence-based information they need to make informed decisions and enables credible reporting on both national and international reporting commitments. As a signatory to several multilateral environmental agreements, South Africa relies on the NBA as a scientific backbone that allows the country to meet its reporting obligations. A few of these are particularly relevant at an ecosystem level. For an example, under the CBD and the Common Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the NBA supports global biodiversity targets through indicators such as the rate list of ecosystem, extent of ecosystem, and the red list index, which assesses and tracks changes to ecosystem threat status. The NBA also contributes to the Sustainable Development Goals by tracking changes in extent and condition of ecosystem over time. Under the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, it supports reporting on land cover change, ecosystem protection, and biodiversity status in terrestrial and freshwater or inland aquatic system. For Ramsar Convention, the NBA contributes to wetland indicators based on the extent and condition of the wetlands. Finally, we have the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which the NBA supports through ecosystem indicators that track conservation, restoration, and impacts of climate change on biodiversity. I think you've skipped one. Okay, so now having established the policy and reporting frameworks, the NBA supports and we have focused on the NBA policy and reporting frameworks that the NBA supports. We now turn into ecosystem headline indicators and their key findings. To assess the state of biodiversity at an ecosystem level, the NBA draws on a subset of global headline indicators, specifically those aligned with Common Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, alongside our very own national headline indicator developed together to provide a comprehensive assessment of South Africa's unique biodiversity. These indicators include the red list of ecosystem, commonly known as ecosystem threat status, which is applied across all realms and zones in the country, and its application across geographic areas of different sizes reflects its flexibility, while highlighting is providing a consistent and scientifically defensible and a repeatable approach for measuring how close our ecosystem types are to collapse when exposed to a single or multiple threatening process or under business as usual scenario. The second global headline indicator is the red list index of ecosystem, which draws solely on the red list of ecosystem assessment outcomes to track genuine or real changes in ecosystem threat status over time. Complementing this global headline indicator is our national headline indicator known as ecosystem protection level. And this indicator has been applied since 2005 and is designed to measure how well ecosystem types are represented within the protected area network. Next. To better understand how the results of these indicators are derived, it's worth unpacking each one of them, starting with the red list of ecosystem. At the heart of this indicator is the concept of ecosystem collapse, which is equivalent to species extinction. So we say an ecosystem has collapsed when it has lost its defining biotic or abiotic features from all occurrences, such that the characteristics of native biota can no longer be sustained or supported. And to assess this risk in a structured and scientifically robust way, the red list of ecosystem is built around three key elements. And these are a set of criteria that captures different ways or different pathways through which an ecosystem can become threatened. And this consists of criterion A and B, which puts focus on special symptoms of collapse, such as decline in extent and distribution, while criterion C and D assesses functional symptoms, looking at degradation in ecosystem processes and condition. Then we have criterion E, which complements the above mentioned criteria by using simulation models to estimate the probability of ecosystem collapse under different scenarios. Secondly, we have threshold, mainly quantitative threshold, which are applied within each criterion to determine how close an ecosystem is to collapsing, and the outcomes are then translated into categories that rank ecosystems according to their level of risk. Next. So I can go back again, sorry. So for the terrestrial ecosystems, we use a combination of systematic and strategic assessment approaches. This is not an arbitrary choice, but rather a reflection that the pressure data is available at different scales and resolution across the country. As a result, the approach had to be flexible and fit for a purpose at each level of the analysis. So starting with criterion A and B, all of the 463 terrestrial ecosystem types were assessed systematically using multi-temporal national land cover data to track changes in ecosystem extent. So this assessment were then the national assessment using the land cover were then complemented with a targeted strategic inputs incorporating additional land cover data from selected provinces and metros, allowing for more comprehensive picture of decline in extent. For criterion C and D, which focuses on functional symptoms of collapse, required a somewhat different approach. And the reason for this comes down to a foundational data limitation. So unlike extent, the country does not yet have a consistently mapped wall-to-wall data on environmental degradation and disruption of biotic processes. As a result, we relied on the best available data where it exists, including invasive alien plant data and overgrazing from STEP project and a Little Karoo, amongst others. This naturally led to a more strategic assessment approach, targeting parts of the country where the data is available. Reliable data is available. So what this means is that we are confident in ecosystem listed as threatened under criterion A and B, and that confidence is supported by the robust land cover data that we have. However, we recognize that some ecosystem types showing functional degradation may be currently listed as least concern, and that is because we do not have a good ecosystem condition and functional integrity data to list them otherwise. So this presents a major limitation in our assessment, right? So from a policy standpoint, this is a conservative approach, which is both intentional and defensible. And from SANBI's position in this is that it is preferable to acknowledge data limitations and be on the side of caution than rely on a weak or incomplete evidence and risk having to downlist ecosystem when more robust data becomes available, considering the legal implication attached when the list gets gazetted. So premature or poorly evidenced listing will undermine the credibility of our entire assessment. Hence, we took this decision. So for full details on the data set and the methodology are acceptable via the link provided, the GET link provided at the bottom right side of the slide. So that's where we describe we give a full description of the data we use and outline and the technical steps of how we conducted our assessment. So I encourage you to visit that site. Next. Since 2014, the risk of collapse across South Africa's terrestrial ecosystem has steadily been increasing, and the latest NBA makes that trajectory impossible to ignore. Today, nearly one-third of the country's 463 terrestrial ecosystem types are listed as threatened, representing 11% of the remaining natural extent. Of those, a significant proportion are classified as either critically endangered or endangered, meaning that they face an immediate risk of collapse. Several pressures are at play or contribute to these losses, but one that stands out above the rest is habitat loss caused by human activities such as expansion of agricultural lands, urban settlements, and commercial forestry, amongst others. And yet, the pressures do not stop at the point of convention. Even when ecosystems have not been fully lost, degradation continues from within through overgrazing and the spread of invasive alien plant species, which steadily erodes ecosystem condition and further weakening their integrity over time. The special patterns The special patterns are also important, and the map on the left highlights that these pressures are not evenly distributed across the country. Instead, they are concentrated in specific biomes, most notably the fynbos, grassland, and Indian Ocean coastal belt. At the provincial level, this concentration becomes even more pronounced. So we have Western Cape, Gauteng, and KZN standing out as the hotspots of pressure. And this is where urban expansion, agricultural transformation, and broader economic development activities have most significantly reshaped the remaining natural landscape. Okay. And so looking at the biome, the threat levels also vary considerably, and the pattern is striking with fynbos, grassland, and Indian Ocean coastal belt carrying the heaviest burden. Fynbos in particular has over half of all of its ecosystem type listed as threatened, covering approximately a quarter of its remaining natural extent. Grassland tells us a similar story, with a third of its ecosystem types classified as threatened, which covers nearly 28% of its remaining extent. But it is the Indian Ocean coastal belt that stands out. Every single one of its ecosystem type is listed as threatened. So, so the question then becomes, why are these biomes bearing such a disproportionate share of the risk? And this can be attributed to the fact that they are among the most ecologically valuable biomes in the country, but also among the most economically attractive. So the combination has made them targets of sustained human pressure for decades, and they continue to be heavily transport up to date. Next. At the provincial level, a similar picture emerges with threat levels varying across provinces, and the pattern is equally striking. Gauteng stands out as the most threatened province in terms of the extent, with 52% of its remaining natural habitat classified as threatened. This is followed by KZN at 39% and Mpumalanga at 34%, reflecting sustained pressure from urbanization, agriculture, and infrastructure development. In the Western Cape, Limpopo, and Northwest, around 15% of the remaining habitat is classified as threatened. And it's worth noting that the Western Cape also contains the higher number of threatened ecosystem, and that is a reflection of its exceptional high landscape and plant diversity. On the other hand, the Northern Cape shows the lowest proportion of threatened habitat, with only 11 ecosystem types classified as threatened, which covers less than 1% of its remaining natural extent. So, but these low numbers do not mean that the Northern Cape is free from concern. Expanding mining activities along the coast and inland, together with broader landscape level changes in plant community composition, driven by rangeland management, drought, climate change, are emerging pressures that warrant a close attention. Next. In this NBA, we also took a step further by identifying ecosystems that are both threatened and underprotected. And the findings reveal that close to a quarter of terrestrial ecosystems are highly threatened and underprotected. And in the Indian Ocean coastal belt, 50% of its ecosystem fall into this category, while 40% of rainbows are affected, reflecting a global pattern where fragmented lowland regions remain extensively remain with extensive habitat loss from agriculture and settlements, making it really protected. And we also have the biodiversity stewardship in the Overberg region has also provided formal protection to some of the ecosystem and their iconic threatened species. Next. Historically, the main pressure on terrestrial ecosystem include habitat loss from croplands, human settlements, and plantations. Since 1990, croplands and plantation have remained relatively stable, but human settlement continue to expand. In addition, pressures such as invasive island plants and rangeland overstocking remain important as they degrade ecosystem processes and function. More recently, new spatial data on the distribution of alien invasive plant across large parts of South Africa has strengthened our assessment, particularly in the fynbos and grassland ecosystem. However, a key limitation remains. We still do not have a comprehensive, spatially explicit data on land degradation nationally, which means that our ability to fully assess and track these impacts over time is challenged. For more details, again, on these pressures, please visit the NBA website, and the link is provided at the bottom of the slide. Next. And we go on to the second global headline indicator, which is the Red List Index of Ecosystem. So this indicator is designed to track real or genuine changes in ecosystem threat status over time, and its scores ranges between 0 and 1, with 0 indicating that all ecosystems within a biome, for an example, have collapsed, and a score of 1 suggesting that they are all least threatened. So far, this indicator has only been applied to the terrestrial ecosystem due to the data availability of multi-temporal national land cover data that allows changes to be tracked over time defensively. And more notably, South Africa alongside Colombia are among the first countries to report on this indicator. And our example was used in the UN CBD guidance to demonstrate how other countries can apply this indicator. Turning into the figure on the left, the results reveal a slow but steady decline in ecosystem terrestrial, slow decline in ecosystem in the terrestrial ecosystem. Some ecosystems are already under severe pressure, most notably the Indian coastal belt and fynbos. And this is clearly reflected on the map where the darker areas indicate higher rates of loss. And next. So to address these data limitations and improve on the RLA assessment, SANBI is leading a 5-year regional project known as Spatial Biodiversity Assessment Planning and Prioritization, that is SBEP for short, funded by French donors, which aims to develop a national spatial database on ecosystem condition and integrity that is fit for a purpose, mainly for improving the rate list of ecosystem assessment, consequently improving national and international reporting as well as national spatial planning. Next. Okay. And yeah, the final indicator we have ecosystem protection level. And unlike the previous indicators that I've just spoken about, this one shift focus from risk to response by asking how well are our ecosystem actually being safeguarded. Right? The NBA 2025 reveals a mixed picture. More than 3/4 of South Africa's terrestrial ecosystem have some form of statutory protection, but having protection on paper and being well protected are two different things, right? Of the 463 ecosystem type, only 121 are well protected and 67 are moderately protected, and the remaining 275 terrestrial ecosystem are either poorly protected or have no protection at all. Looking at this in terms of the area helps put it into perspective, and that is the formal protection has increased steadily from 7.8% in the 2000 to just under 10% to date. And this progress has been largely driven by biodiversity stewardship programs, which have been instrumental in extending protection beyond state-owned land. And the true figures are likely to even be higher than that because of the OCMs have not yet been fully assessed and mapped in South Africa. So once these are, the total extent of the protected and conserved land is expected to exceed the 10% of the land mass, which will be a meaningful milestone for South Africa's conservation commitment. Next. Looking at the protection level across biome and provinces, some clear patterns also emerges. Fynbos and savanna biomes are the best protected, driven largely by national parks in the savanna and provincial reserves and mountain catchment areas in the fynbos. The forest biome is another success story, benefiting from strong legislative protection and a long-standing cultural practices that have supported its conservation. But the picture is uneven. Even within the fynbos, a clear split exists. Mountain areas are well protected, while the lowland fynbos remains significantly underprotected and highly threatened. Grassland and Karoo ecosystem face similar challenges, with many falling into the protected and not protected categories. At the provincial level, the same gaps persist. Western Cape, Northern Cape, and Western Cape have the highest number of underrepresented ecosystem. And this highlights a central message that the challenge is not only the amount of biodiversity we have, but we equally and effectively, but how we equitably and effectively is protected across the landscape. Next. So what does all of this mean for the way forward? So the NBA 2025 distilled 15 key messages into 7 clear priorities for action. And I want to briefly walk you through each of them, starting with the biodiversity inclusive spatial planning, which really is our first line of defense against further loss. This priority action ensures that ecosystem priorities are built into where and how development happens, guiding decision before further damage occurs, identify areas for restoration, and expanding protected and conserved areas. In short, it makes biodiversity part of the planning from the beginning and not an afterthought. But planning alone isn't enough. To support this decision, we need the right enabling environment, and that brings us to policy development, which addresses pressures across sectors. Of course, policies only matter if they are actually applied, and that's where enforcement and compliance comes in, ensuring that protection is implemented on the ground. And once those safeguard measures are in place, the focus then shifts to action, and then that we then move on to management and implementation, which is where it translates into priorities into practical on the ground interventions. At the same time, we need to strengthen how we respond to emerging challenges. This is where innovation and technologies play a crucial role by enhancing how we detect, monitor, and respond to pressures in real time. However, all of this depends on the strength of our information, and that's why data and monitoring deserve a particular attention. One of the most consistent limitations in this assessment is the lack of comprehensive spatial explicit data on land degradation. And closing this gap is not optional, it's a foundational to better understand, to better assess and make better decisions. Next. So the data that fed on into the NBA assessment or the NBA assessment for the terrestrial roam are listed or have been uploaded in the Git repo. However, we are not able to share all of the data due to data sharing agreements. And yeah, we have provided a list of data sets that we have used and their sources. And for those that are publicly available, we also provide the link for easy access. So the use of the NBA listed as an additional resource. So, the other thing that I'd like to highlight is that the 2025 list of threatened ecosystem is not yet gazetted, and the process to gazette this list takes a while. It's a lengthy process that involves different stakeholders. So we encourage that if people want to use this list, use it as additional information, maybe for planning and research purposes, but to bear in mind that they need to reference to the 2022 legal list, because of it is what is the legal list that is currently gazetted. The other important is to note that the data, Sanbi Beaches team is in the process of uploading the data sets that we've used in the assessment. So that process takes a bit of time. So we just ask that you bear with us, and if there's an urgent need to get the data, you can please contact us using the NBA email address, and then we'll happily share the data that is available to you. But yeah, in the coming months, we hope that the data will be uploaded on Beaches for everyone to access. So this is where I end. I hope I was clear enough. And yeah, I'll hand over to Anisha. Thanks.
Thank you, Mapale. That was a really nice tour of the terrestrial assessment for 2025. Yeah, apologies, I was a bit trigger happy with my mouse. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I don't see any questions in the chat. We have about 5 minutes for any thoughts or clarification. Yeah, that's a good question. The presentations should be available. I think Samkita will load it onto YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so you should be able to find it there. Azim, maybe you can just answer in the chat, if that's correct. Cool. any other questions? You can just raise your hand or you can put it in the chat. Okay, Mupale, clearly you did a good job of explaining things.
Yeah, or maybe I was too soft that nobody had me.
No, you. I think we could hear you after. Okay. If there are no questions, if there is anything that you think about after the presentation or after the webinar, maybe you could get into contact with the team, and please visit the website. There's lots of cool stuff on there, the stuff that Mapale talked about and the other stuff from the other realms as well. And yeah, please join us for the future webinars to come. And we hope to see you soon. Thanks so much for joining. Have a good Friday and weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.